Currently, I work managing a forest coffee farm in southwestern Ethiopia in an area called Sheka. It's part of the Sheka Afro-montane forest. It's part of also a UNESCO heritage, but we're on the outskirts where farming is allowed, and we do forest coffee in that area. Basically, forest coffee is coffee grown inside a forest as part of the forest. So the indigenous forest is not destroyed in order to be able to produce the coffee. So it's thinned a little to about 60 to 50%. I mean, it's quite a bit of thinning, but you still get quite a lot of shade because they want the natural diversity to be able to interact with everything else. So you get the special flavor of the forest coffee. So yeah, it's kind of a specialty coffee. It is absolutely about how to enrich the forest because it's part of the business. I mean, it's not because it's not out of the goodness of our hearts or the goodness of the business, but they actually need the forest to be enriched. Not just for the coffee, but also we do honey as well. So it's for the honey as well. You get all the flavors of the honey from specific trees which are all around the forest. And in order to have that enrichment of the diversity, you actually need to actively take care of it. What they do with these forest coffees when they first take the land is that they make space within the natural indigenous forest. So they make space to plant the forest, to plant the coffee. But the natural forest in each canopy and each layer stays as it is, more or less. So you have different trees, you have the upper canopies, you have the medium and the lower ones as well. For the honey, for example, the main trees that they keep are some of the major ones that are used in the scientific world as well, such as Prunus africana, which in my previous life working for the World Agroforestry Center, I know is part of the research for prostate cancer. But then there's Syzygium guinense and there's Schefflera abyssinica, all these kinds of trees which give the unique flavor to the honey. So permanently we have around 150 people who are there, but then we also have seasonal workers who come in to weed because we have manual weeding. We don't use chemicals. I mean, you can't use the chemicals because, again, of the bees and the honey and all the interaction that you get. And then we have the seasonal coming in and out to pick, to weed. To weed is throughout, but picking is seasonal, like maybe 3 to 4 months out of a year. Currently, it's a camp. It's very much still at a camp stage, so we have dormitories for the workers, and we kind of built a semi-permanent home for ourselves, for myself and my son, where I homeschool him at the farm, and it's not easy. There's no water, there's no electricity. In order to get water, you have to go down half a kilometer, to the spring. It's not easy, but it's fun, My son moved from Nairobi to there, and there wasn't a day that he said he was bored. So I decided to shift from a modern kind of middle-class lifestyle where I was based in Nairobi to the forest in Ethiopia just after the changes happened in Ethiopia in 2018. I had always actually wanted to be working in a forest. I actually started in 2009 with my own farm, 1,000 hectares in western Ethiopia again, but it didn't work out because of the political situation. And so when I got the chance now and the government changed, I just jumped at it and went right back again. To say that the Prime Minister currently, Abiy Ahmed, I have to say he is passionate about the environment. I mean, that's one of the few things that I do actually believe that he cares about. Narrative around restoration is so big that you might feel that you're overwhelmed, I mean, like, what can I do? I mean, I'm just a tiny little cog in this whole thing. But at the same time, we're trying to raise, the knowledge and the capacity of all the farmers around us as well, so that we grow together and we restore together. COVID has affected the seasonal workers a lot because the borders were kind of closed. Public transport could not move. And so they could not come to weed, they could not come to... So it was affecting both of us. They could not come and get a job, and we could not get the work done. So most of the work on the farm is, more than 70% is done by women. Priorly, it was not normal. In fact, in the whole region, they'd never seen a female general manager of a farm. So I was the first. So you could see women are like, hey, you know, we've got a woman up there. You can't treat me like this and that and the other. I want to go tell my boss. Coffee is very, very important in Ethiopian culture. In fact, most of the coffee that is produced in the country is consumed in the country. You know, we drink it 3 times a day for normal, and at the same time it's also a social culture. You know, that's where you call your friends, your girlfriends, and you go through the whole ceremony. But the coffee is a big business, but the sad thing is that the farmers, the producers, don't actually get much of that share. I think what would really help in the agenda of restoring our forests and at least keeping, you know, mitigating and adapting to the change of the climate and all that, what would help, I think, is if the consumers that consume the coffee that goes out into the world are a little bit more intentional in the way they buy their coffee. There are several types of coffees, what they call forest coffees, full forest coffees. These are forests that are, coffee trees that are grown actually inside a natural forest. Then you have the semi-forest coffees, which are like what we do, where you thin out and then you bring in and plant from outside the coffee trees. And then we have what the farmers plant for themselves in their backyards. And then we have plantations where people just take up a land and then they just plant the coffee trees. And then you have the shaded systems and the full sun systems, what they call. So there's no shade. It's just, for example, what they use in Kenya is mostly full sun. And they also use a species, the Robusta coffee rather than the Arabica. So the Arabica is supposed to be lighter, gentler, and, you know, more tasteful in terms of the taste rather than Robusta. So those are just some basic differences of how coffee is grown. The reason that we do mostly forest coffee or semi-forest coffee is because, I don't know if you know the history of coffee, but it kind of originated in the southwestern part of Ethiopia, which is where we are, Sheka and Kaffa. It's in Kaffa, but they're very close to each other. They're actually part of the same forest. In the research that the World Agroforestry has done, I mean, they found that full sun production does give you more, a lot more, but only for a certain number of years. And after that, you've depleted the soil. So, you know, there's no more for your coffees to produce from. Whereas in the forest coffee, you know, it's steady. It's slow, but it's always steady, and you always get a certain amount of coffee that you need. Not as fast, not as much, but more intentional than it is when it's done full sun. I would advocate, of course, always for semi-forest and forest coffees because they preserve our legacies, our legacies. They preserve our trees, they preserve our environment for ourselves, you know, not for the sake of the earth. And I think people need to be more intentional again in the kind of coffees that they look for. Look for forest and semi-forest coffees because of what they mean and what is behind them and what they preserve. There is a lot more behind them, so we need to be a lot more intentional in terms of the coffees that we look for.